is to does that now. Um, what I want to do is upload the recording and then share it on the Facebook group for people to be able to access it easily in one place and not be mailing us to ask for links and Dropbox and all of that nonsense. So I hope that's okay. It won't be public on YouTube, but it will be available to the members of that Facebook group. So yeah, just reiterating what Renata was saying about bearing our souls. Don't mention any names when you do talk about people you know. And yeah, so I'm going to share my screen so that we can go through some slides. And okay, so yeah, it's just so today really looking at the defense mechanisms that are specific to each type. But before we do that, just to contextualize defense mechanisms more generally, because the Enneagram didn't invent them, psychology as a discipline has been exploring them for a very long time. And some of the important things to know about them is that they are, firstly, that they're unconscious. I think that's one of the most important things about them. And if they weren't unconscious, they wouldn't be protecting us. They protect us by making things unconscious and by making themselves unconscious. So otherwise, we would know that we're hiding something from ourselves. So that's important. And they are linked to our nervous system. So they're not things that we think up in our prefrontal cortex and with just the cognitive, rational aspects of our brain. They're linked in to our neurological kind of hardware and are activated when our fight or flight responses kick in the very old parts of our brain. So you'll know from when you were most recently triggered, think about the last week, that you were flooded with adrenaline and cortisol and activated, nervous, whatever it was, a fear response. And in that response, there will also be a cognitive element that kicks in later. So you can see in this diagram what I found quite interestingly, different parts of the brain are activated for different types of threats. So we've got very primary reactions, and then we've got the more cognitive, rational elements of the defense mechanism. So both of those are going to be involved when we need to defend ourselves in some way. So these are very primary things. And what we've got to understand is that we don't know the difference between a literal physical survival threat and an emotional threat. So for us as humans, the risk of being rejected by the group, the tribe, is life-threatening. It's built into our physiology that we want to belong. We're social animals. The risk of being disconnected completely from a one-on-one relationship can be experienced as life-threatening because that need for a one-on-one bond is one of our earliest, most basic needs as a baby. We need to bond with somebody. It's built in. So you'll know in an intimate relationship that it can feel like life or death when there's conflict. If we're honest with ourselves, it can feel as though we might die when we're rejected, or when a relationship ends, or when we are excluded in some way, or when the company's going to be restructured and we don't know where we stand socially in terms of the hierarchy, who values us, who's got our back. That throws us into immense anxiety, and it's going to trigger defense mechanisms. So they're going to be primary emotional reactions, and then we're going to start finding ways to protect ourselves. And so we need to understand how important these are and how built in they are. So they're not abstract. They're not things that we can learn about on the Enneagram and just think about them. They're in our bodies. They're part of our physiology. They're part of our way of being. So our awareness of them is going to have to go all the way down to our primary experience, which is what happens when we are triggered and flooded. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we might not have taken into consideration when we hear the word defense mechanism. I'm increasingly becoming aware of somatic psychology. Things are embodied in 3D in the here and now. And working with the Enneagram, we've got to kind of anchor it back into our living experience in the moment. And part of EQ is moment-to-moment awareness. So I think this is really important, that we approach everything that we learn in the Enneagram with a kind of somatic embodied approach. So think about the kinds of things that could trigger us. I mentioned a few already. So someone, a feeling that we at risk of being harmed or controlled. When we feel disliked, excluded, not valued. When we hear negative attributions made about a group that we identify with. Even if it's our soccer team. Someone saying, oh, that's a shit team, I don't support them. That might actually activate some people. Or your political party. Some people get very upset when you criticize a leader that they support, as you've probably noticed in the past. We've seen a lot of that. And then when our self-belief and our image is tacitly or overtly challenged. Like say an Enneagram 5, we feel stupid or exposed. Suddenly we're going to feel activated and triggered. Just by small things. Or say Enneagram 1, more likely, if criticized in public, you know that that's a big activation. So these Enneagram defenses are quite personality specific. We all use a lot of them, but different personalities have a tendency to prefer some over others. So you'll see how they've been attributed to different Enneagram styles. And I don't know who it was exactly. I didn't have time to do that research, and I'd like to know. If anyone does, please put it in the chat. But who it was that said, rationalization is 7, reaction formation is 1. So somebody did that work of matching the long list of defense mechanisms to Enneagram types. And I'm not sure exactly where that happened, whether it was Naranjo, most likely, because he's a psychiatrist, or maybe Riso and Hudson. So if you know, please share. I think that would be quite an interesting thing to trace it back, because we find all these things being overlaid on the Enneagram. Object relations, Hornevian triads, all of that stuff. And some of the theorists that they were taken from never knew the Enneagram. So it's always interesting to trace back. So notice this, as you're learning this thing today, if you don't already know it very well, that because our defense mechanisms are unconscious, we often get defensive about our defense mechanisms. So I'm sure you've noticed that if somebody says to you that's projection, or no, that's denial, whatever it is, or oh, maybe you're rationalizing, that you have another defensive wave when somebody points out your defense mechanism to you. There's an instinctual, don't strip me bare of my defense mechanism. We need them. They protect us, and without them we feel very unsafe. So you've got to be aware, if you're a coach or facilitator, working with these things and integrating them into your work. They're incredibly powerful keys to change when they are handled in the right way with clients to help them see how these defense mechanisms are perpetuating their behavior. But if you're heavy-handed with them, you're going to make your client feel unsafe. So you need to handle them with care in your work. So this is a list of defense mechanisms. I put a star next to the ones that have been matched to particular Enneagram types. There are a couple here that are missing, so I couldn't find narcotization. That's not one of the ones from the official textbooks or one of the Freudian defense mechanisms, so I'm not really sure where that name comes from for the Enneagram 9. But the other ones here have been named in the psychology literature, and they've been classified here into mature, immature, narcissistic, and neurotic. And the immature ones are seen as more primitive, And then you've got the mature ones, which are ones that are more adaptive and they're more conscious. So the more mature ones allow some expression of feeling, but in a way that's kind of channeled and processed. So they're a lot more conscious. The ones that are immature are very unconscious, very primal. The narcissistic ones are about basically thinking that you can impose your reality on reality itself, and that other people will be subject to your reality in a sense. And then for the neurotic ones, they're really about managing one's own anxiety. So there are these classifications of them that are fairly helpful. I think just knowing which ones are more mature is quite helpful, because you can think, okay, going forward, how might I work with that and become more conscious in how I deal with things? So you know what it's like when you're around someone who's quite self-deprecating and they name their defense mechanism in the moment, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. When someone says that, it kind of eases your nerves because of the fact that they are self-aware. I don't know if you've noticed that when people are self-aware, it down regulates everybody's nervous systems. It makes us feel safe because we trust that the other person is self-aware, and they're not going to act out. You can see that excessive use of the immature defense mechanisms is associated with psychopathology. And psychopathology often is just another word for dangerous behavior, dangerous to oneself and dangerous to others. So the more we can become aware of our defense mechanisms and begin to be able to use more mature defense mechanisms, the more we establish safety and connection between us. So we're not going to be attacking from an unconscious place in ourselves. We're not going to be violently blaming the other and failing to take any accountability for our own behavior. So we're going to be able to function more successfully when we start becoming conscious of the impulses that are arising in us, their intensity, being able to be with that, acknowledge it, notice, and then to regulate, self-regulate, to calm ourselves down, and to then be more conscious about how we respond. I mean, all of this is like standard emotional intelligence stuff. So if there are any questions, just wave. Renata, I'll keep notice. I've got a little window of a few faces, so I can't see if anybody's like completely confused. Renata, if you see anybody looking completely befuddled, please stop me. Okay.
All right.
So just raise.
Please do either unmute yourselves or wave your hand or click on the raise hand function if you've got a question at any point.
Okay. So I'm just going to keep going quick, because I want us to get to the point where we can break out. So I put stars next to the ones that you saw. They've been matched to particular Enneagram types, and these are seen by whoever attributed them as the favorite defense mechanisms of each type. And basically how I see them is that they keep the whole show in place. So they mask our wounding from ourselves. They stop us from feeling the very core pain behind the type structure. They mask the vice from us. They mask that core suffering that drives the whole pattern. And they're going to also prevent us from seeing our subtype, which is the kind of instinct-specific manifestation of the vice. I know some of this is going to be technically difficult if you're new to the Enneagram. Don't worry about it. Let's work with these defense mechanisms. Later on, you can go and explore your subtype. That's a very important part of the Enneagram. So every single time we get together, say, go and explore subtype. But these defense mechanisms are going to mask the way in which our subtype is expressing the vice in the world. So you'll probably get a sense of that as we go along. Any questions straight away?
I'm not sure what the question is, but I'm looking at narcotization where it says a blanket defense mechanism.
Yeah.
So whereas reaction formation feels like in the moment, that's what I do as I'm triggered. So I'm wondering if some of these are kind of more blanket defense mechanisms and some of them are more situational as I'm triggered defense mechanisms.
Very, very, very helpful question. Very good. Thank you so much for asking that. So, that is the case. So, depending on your childhood situation and context, you have a more specific or more general defense mechanism. It might be more situationally triggered, it might be more triggered in a particular type of relationship. So, they are very different and they function differently. So, narcotization, for example, a blanket defense mechanism because of one's early childhood context, and that is, we're going to get to that one first actually, but basically narcotization is pulling up an entire blanket against the world as a 9, so fogging the world out, finding a way of withdrawing from the entire world because of a fear of conflict and disharmony, and having a deep attachment to comfort. So there's an idealization in the 9 of comfort and harmony, and 9s will do what they need to do to maintain that feeling. And then for, say, identification for the 3, it's going to be, I want positive regard. In this situation, I'm going to identify with a particular image and I'm going to imagine that I am that, and I'm going to amp up that behavior for this moment. So it's less of a buffer. It's much more of a let's read how it is around here and be that. So you can see it's quite a different state of awareness as well. And this is one of the things that Tom Condon helps us understand. There's a sensory and somatic element to this. There's a way of seeing the world. There's a visual field. There's senses. There are a whole lot of things that go along with it that we can start understanding. So, for example, when 8s narcotize, they completely disconnect from their bodies. So they kind of numb out. They'll have stories going in their head, but kind of disorganized thoughts. And they'll actually...
8s or 9s then?
9s. Did I say 8s?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's 9. Yeah, so 9s will kind of fog out and disconnect from their bodies. So 8s will disconnect in a different way from the gut center. So every single defense mechanism is a way of disconnecting from reality in one way or another, and disconnecting from oneself in one way or another. So we're disconnecting from the painful feelings within us, and we're disconnecting from painful elements of the external reality. So it's helpful to understand that they play that dual role of protecting us from, the inner pain, blinding us really to our reactions to things that are painful, and quickly transforming them into something that we can kind of cope with. Okay, so what I want to do is talk through the defense mechanisms, and I'm going to talk through them within the object relations triads. So I'm going to do 936, 825, 714 in those clusters, because they're basically clustered around primary needs and wounds. You'll see kind of what that means as we go along. So you see here, they deny reality, twist reality, resist reality, and keep our painful feelings from being experienced. So all of them do that. And they're a very normal part of everyday life. So I want to be sure that we emphasize here that they're not bad. Defense mechanisms are not bad, and we're not trying to destroy them. We've got to appreciate that we really, really need them, and we really, really needed them as children. As little kids, we needed ways of dissociating or handling overwhelming emotional experiences. And these are the things that we learned and built. It just so happens that as we come to be adults, those things are not necessary all the time. and sometimes they have unintended consequences. So if you're doing denial all the time as an 8, it's really going to limit your responsivity, your connections with others, and down the line, it's going to lead to the exact thing that you're trying to avoid. Okay.
And Ing, just, I'm sure you're going to get there, but just to say that, our experience and the defense mechanisms that we employ are not necessarily only from our type. We've got our tri-type and our lines, and we probably all do projection and rationalization and all the rest, and I think it's important for us to look and see that from time to time we can employ any of these, not just necessarily, primarily probably, the one from our core type, but, I think, all of us project, in some way,
Thank
and
you.
etc., and do all the others.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very important. And one of the things that happens when we go down the line of disintegration is we go to the low end of that type includes the fixation and the defense mechanism. So you need to just notice here, okay, my tri-type will include rationalization, narcotization, and introjection. Great. So it's helpful that under stress, you're going to notice that triple cocktail of defenses kicking in and differently in different contexts, and they're going to lead you to behave in certain ways. And then down the lines, so yeah, make a little quick mental note and pay particular attention to those ones. So all three of your tri-type elements, and especially your line of disintegration, I would say. Renata, anything else you want to say about that?
No.
Okay, cool.
Just
Thanks so much.
again, another observation just on this blanket versus specific is some of them feel a little preemptive, like for identification for me feels almost preemptive. I'm going to do that, before I'm even triggered, as a kind of, it happens before I'm even triggered. I'm doing it as a prevention strategy.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, preemptive, definitely, as opposed to waiting for triggering or reactive.
Lynn is waving at us. Go for it, Lynn.
Just to clarify, Ingrid, so the triple cocktail then, if we're on disintegration, is including the tri-type and the lines. So for an 8, they'll go on the lines to 5 and 2. And then if they're an 8-3-7, they'll go to rationalization and repression, identification. Have I got that correct? And I'm not fully clear on what you said. When we go down the lines, we immediately go to the fixation.
Yeah. So I think what I was just doing is giving a bit more detail to what Renata highlighted is that we use lots of them. So I would say we need to pay particular attention to our tri-type as our default. And then when we are triggered, we're going to go down the line of disintegration and we're going to go to the fixation and the defense mechanism of the type down the line of disintegration. I know, Renata, you emphasize going down both lines. I kind of tend to emphasize the disintegration line a bit more because for me it just is more obvious.
Yeah, I think it's more common, but I think in rare occurrences, so for me, for sure, I go into narcotization as a 3. I notice that, but there have been times in my life where I all of a sudden find myself in worst case scenario planning, where something triggers me more to the low side of 6. So Lynn, I think the answer is just, when Ingrid says fixations and defense mechanisms, it's also passions and vices, everything that represents the low side of that type, which in the heart space is vice and passion, in the head space is fixation, and then out of that, the defense mechanism. So just the lower aspects of those types.
Thank
Yeah.
But
you.
I agree with Ingrid that what we'll see more often is the low side of our line of disintegration.
Yeah, perfect.
I also think the 3 is a special case because you're on the inner triangle. So when you look at the low end of 9, it's pretty much the low end of 6. It's more disconnection from the body and going into wheel spin and panic in the head. So I would imagine that you can see that 6 quite easily when you go down, you know, goes around.
Mm. For me, the low side of 6, that stuff is much more rare.
Mm.
Would be particular things that would trigger that, but the usual response is to the low side of 9.
Cool. So yeah, I think we can't really just nail down this is exactly what happens. The Enneagram is a tool to help us notice and not to only notice the things that are, explicitly named, because it's dynamic. We're moving around all the time. If you're somewhere on the hexad, you're going to be going, ideally as a 7, I'm going from 5 to 8 to 2, I'm really moving and growing. And watching out for the opposites is the disintegration from 7 to 1 to 4, to down the low end. So Uranio specifically speaks about the downward spiral and the upward spiral. And he takes it even further and uses very religious imagery around the war over your soul to pull you down, or for you to intentionally choose the hard work of the upward spiral. So these defense mechanisms are quite helpful as one of the flags in the Enneagram of, oh, look, I'm doing reaction formation. 7s will go to 1. And reaction formation is when you put on a particular face to hide your true feelings. So if as a 7 in this room, or 7 in your Tritap, if you notice yourself repressing certain feelings, pushing them away and putting on the feeling, and it might be a clenched jaw and passive aggressive but pretending you're not angry, then you know, okay, I'm doing that thing. So these defense mechanisms, one of the things that you can build in is a bit of a flag, a bit of an aid to self-awareness of what's going on right now when you feel something kicking in. So just the dynamism, I think, I'm trying to highlight. Anything else, Renata? Okay.
No, let's dive in.
Okay, cool. So starting with the attachment types, the 9, the 3, and the 6. So there's an attachment to an ideal state, or to a state of comfort and well-being in the 9, the 3, and the 6. So in the 9, that takes the form of narcotization. So how do you maintain comfort and harmony as a 9? So this blanket defense is a kind of pushing away of reality and anything that would trigger anxiety or discomfort. So I've used the remote control example. It could be watching a lot of TV. It could be smoking a lot of weed. It could be eating. So it's going to manifest specifically for different subtypes. So for the self-preservation 9, it's more likely to be around food and physical comfort. For the sexual 9, it's going to be numbing oneself out by going along with the flow with another significant person, not standing one's own ground. For the social 9, it's going to be numbing oneself with busyness, keeping very busy in a group, serving a group. So it's all about comfort, that soft blankie that makes you feel soothed. It's a very self-soothing defense mechanism, but it's not consciously like, oh, I'm going to go and soothe. It's a self-forgetting, it's a self-deletion and numbing. So this is something I'm sure all the 9s are sitting here like, oh yes, I do that, because it's built in, it's what we do. So let's go to the next one in the attachment triad, the inner triangle, 3. So for 3s, it's going to be an identification with a certain image. So when we talk about identification, we're not thinking, oh, I want to be like that picture on the Hugo Boss advert. It's almost like I'm going to embody that image and I'm going to think about myself in that way. It's like an identity formation that happens within the experience of threes. So if you think about maybe when you were a teenager and you were forming your identity, you dress up as a goth or heavy metal or whatever it is, and you would kind of imagine yourself in a certain way and behave in that way, but it's not from your deep heart of hearts. It's very much about how you want to be in context, either to be accepted or whatever. So you'll dress a certain way. So the three is doing identification with a certain image in order to have approval or feel successful, feel valuable. So it's to maintain a particular self-image of being worthwhile. It's not just successful. It's adding value, being worth something, because we know that this is a cover in the three for a feeling of worthlessness and emptiness. And the vice of three is vanity, and don't misunderstand that. It basically means a kind of striving in vain to earn worth. You can try your very best, but you're going to be trying in vain to earn inner worth by getting it from external. Genuine inner worth comes from within. So if you can remember that phrase, striving in vain versus authentic worth, I think it's quite helpful. So identification is seeing oneself in a certain way and trying to be a certain way. And threes will use the defense mechanism in context. They'll choose, okay, this kind of person would react that way to a threat or to a feeling of worthlessness. So I want to invite you, Renata, as having a much better understanding of three. Anything you want to say here?
So I think with the three, you can see how closely the fixation of deceit, which I know Beatrice Chestnut describes that wonderfully, that the deceit is about the shape shifting that the three does. So threes kind of subconsciously, let's say, like as a three enters a space or a room, you can almost hear the cogs going, calculating how exactly do I need to show up, and knowing exactly, no matter who they're with or what situation you drop them into, how to show up in a way that's going to be palatable and be acceptable and get the positive regard there. So, if that means that I need to be wild and unhinged in a certain thing, or very professional in another, or very warm and friendly, and whatever the case may be, I know how to show up with a group of mothers, a group of CEOs, a group of Enneagram people, or whatever the case may be. So it's this adjusting how we show up is the deceit, because it's never about who am I really, it's about what is required to look a certain way to get the positive regard. So you can see how the identification is so closely linked to that. And the knee-jerk response that reveals this is any situation in which it becomes impossible to maintain the right image. I'll give you an example. A client of mine, self-preservation 3, mid-50s, sales director of an IT software development company. And they said they wanted to, I see Robert's hands up. Rob, we'll come to you in a moment. So anyway, long story short, new CEO comes in, and she had tried to sell, they wanted to sell a new certain thing that they said, would be bespoke. And every time she sold it over the last 3 years, the development department couldn't do it. They just couldn't deliver. And so eventually they said to the beginning of this year, just stop selling that. And when the new CEO came in, he said, why has that stuff not been sold? Why is there a failure to sell that? And she said, the development department couldn't deliver. And so I was told to stop. And the entire team threw her under the bus and said, that's not true. And in that moment, she looked like a failure. And the CEO decided to demote her so she would no longer be sales director. And he said, we're doing a restructure. And in the meeting where they offered her the job of manager of just the one area that she is successful in, she had said she was cool with that. She was only too happy because whoever got the role of sales director would fail. She wasn't interested in it. But in the meeting where they said, okay, now you're going to have this job, same salary, but just in the domain that she could be successful, she just completely lost it. She had a complete breakdown, and she said she couldn't understand. It made no sense. She just said, not a fuck, I'm not interested. Shove your job, I'm out of here. Which was a shock as much to her as it was to the HR woman who was her friend and the new CEO. So it's like, if I can't be successful, and because you're threatening my image, and I'm not going to be demoted after sweating blood and tears for this organization and giving up my whole life to do this. And she like phoned me. I've been coaching her for a year, and she said, I don't understand why I did that. It makes no sense. Why would I tell them to shove the job? I don't want them to shove the job, and she had a complete meltdown and breakdown because the image is so wrapped up in that sales director position. And intellectually, she thought she was okay with the demotion. But in the moment that it happened, she just completely lost the plot.
Yeah.
Robert?
Yeah, it was just, I've noticed with threes that the passion and the fixation, vice and deceit seem to be interchangeable depending on which school and which author you read.
Yes.
Can you say anything to that? Can you shed any light?
You're quite right, Robert. And Ingrid has a strong point of view about which way around it is. And I just hold that they both, vanity and deceit, are both low aspects. And you're quite right. And for everybody, that depending on who you read, and a lot of the major authors and thought leaders do disagree. So what happened was Ichazo held that it was vanity was the passion. Ingrid, am I right? And Naranjo swapped them around. So that's where the confusion came in. So some people are citing Ichazo, and Ichazo and Naranjo are our original kind of people. So Naranjo swapped and said, no, it's deceit is the passion of the three. Yeah, so quite right. It is confusing. Ingrid, I know you can explain why you hold that it's vanity.
I think the fixation is more of a behavior, and the vice is a heart quality. It's a feeling. It's more emotional. So I would recommend doing a bit of reading and see what resonates. I tend to follow some of the earlier teachers, and Sandra Matry is my favorite for understanding the intrapsychic dynamics. So I'd highly recommend her. If you want to understand what it feels like to be a certain type and the inner suffering of the heart, that's your go-to person. And understanding the vice as a suffering, it's passion. It's, in the original Latin, it means a suffering. So not to judge it, but to empathize with the core feeling that's driving the whole structure. So, yeah, I don't want to go into a big defense of why I prefer.
Yeah, I think either way, if you look at the virtue of the three, which is some expressed as authenticity, veracity, truthfulness, honesty, being my true self versus the self-image vain self, or the deceit. So the authenticity kind of holds as the opposite to either.
Yes. The vain, going back to that word of striving in vain and linking it to the empty heart, which is the heart wound of three, that feeling of in vain is a kind of emptiness of heart, which for me rings truer as a description of a feeling than deceit, which is more of a, okay, so what do I do about that feeling of inner emptiness and worthlessness? But yeah, I mean, we could spend a whole day, which I do, on different types. And three is coming up if you're interested in three.
The vain, for me, the vanity is, if you think about the feeling that underpins it, and it is, what is vanity about? It's about the image. What is the image about? It's about getting the positive regard. So it's really the desperation for love and approval that sits at the core of the three. That's what the vanity is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to go on to the next type from here. So we're doing 936, which are the attachment triad, just to remind you. So 6 is an attachment defense, is an attachment to safety. So if 6s have identified how to be safe, the way that they're going to maintain that sense of safety is through projection. So they need to feel that they are loyal and that they are loyal to some kind of safety environment. So in self-praise, it's going to be the home. In sexual, it's more likely to be one person. And it's more complicated than that, but just for shorthand. And in social, it's going to be to a group and potentially an ideology, some form of belonging. So in order to maintain that, the 6s are going to have to use projection to avoid rejection. So if they are feeling negative about a certain person, leader, or situation, in order to maintain the feeling that I'm loyal, they're going to have to project those negative feelings externally onto the external figure. So a sexual 6 in a marriage, for example, if they are feeling very insecure, they are going to find it difficult to own their feelings of ambivalence towards that person, their conflicted feelings, and they might then project those feelings onto the other person and then take that person on in order to test, am I secure or not? And so 6s are in the conflicted center of the head center. So they're going to have conflicted thoughts. They're going to consult an inner committee, and often that is going to take the form of externalizing their difficult feelings. So 6s give away their power. I mean, all head types give away their power in one form or another. They seek safety outside their own grounded power. 6s do that through projecting power externally. And then at the same time as projecting power externally and wanting to establish loyalty to power, they are skeptical of it. So they maintain safety by just being sure that they can spot the trouble where they've projected their power. So it's quite a complicated one in the case of 6. So Renata, anything you want to add here about 6?
Not right now.
Okay. But 6, all about safety, all about it, and the projection of power externally. And 6s will often think of themselves as small and a powerful figure as big. Yeah, Renata, you're going to say something?
Yeah, so just that, one of the things that keeps 6 children safe is understanding what the usually father figure, but what the parental or the authority figure's rules are, because then I know how to paint within the lines and stay safe. And so the substitution for that becomes the rules, that in adult, so there's a projection there as well. So then if I know what the rules are, which is why they're often attracted to jobs and careers that are very clearly defined, what is right and wrong, accounting and auditing and stuff, that I know exactly what are the lines that I need to stick within, what are the rules.
Yeah. And you see there one of the words that is emboldened at the bottom, misattribution. So 6s often idealize somebody and think that they're going to find safety with that person or with that group. So they misattribute certain things onto that group and find it very difficult to tolerate the negative sides of that group. So they will suppress negative features of a group where they think they have found safety. So they project all goodness, and their trap is actually idealization. So that's something to notice as a 6, is where have you blown someone up into powerful and thought that you can find safety under their wing, or that they're going to protect you, that you think of them as bigger than you, more capable, more capacity. That's part of the projection, is having things are out of scale. That you think you're smaller than that person. You're absolutely not. So sixes can become aware of that projection of their power outside, or even to an imaginary figure, or the inner committee has the power, as opposed to knowing one's inner guidance as a six, taking that power and finding it within. So projection. Okay, so we've gone through the inner circle and inner triangle. It's all about attachment, either to comfort, love, or safety in the case of that inner triangle, and the defense mechanisms are going to prevent us from feeling that that is at stake. Like I might be in conflict, my human dignity might be threatened, or I'm going to not be loved, or I'm going to be unsafe. Defense mechanism kicks in. Okay, so let's go around the hexad, starting with 8. So the 8 denial defense mechanism can take the form of outright lying. So Theo has an affair with junior admin person, and the boss finds out and calls them in for a conversation, and it's flat denial. So that is something that happens with 8s. Orania is very hard-hitting about the fact that 8s will often simply lie. But it also means a denial of goodness in the world at times. It means a denial of goodness in the self. It means a denial of one's own sensitivity and feelings. And that denial of goodness in the world is often defending oneself against the possibility of betrayal. So an 8 might see people doing altruistic things, and they'll say, that's bullshit. You know, they're just trying to do X, Y, Z, because of the hardening of the heart that was a necessary defense mechanism in early childhood, is because of the soft, innocent, vulnerable, beautiful sensitivity of the 8 heart. I can't afford to let that be out in the world, because the world is a very harsh place. So I'm going to deny that I have that, and I'm going to deny that it's safe for that to be kind of available or responsive or part of my relationships, even though there's such a deep longing to connect. The 8s have this denial defense, and it also prevents them from taking responsibility for their actions. So they need so much to maintain that hardness that they get into a very rigid, fixed stance around the denial. So this is something you're going to have to work with very carefully in your coaching with an 8, because you can give them feedback about how they perceived, and they're going to be impervious to it. You know, I once interviewed all the people in 8's management environment. There were about 22 people reporting to this 8, and they hadn't spoken to each other, but 5 of them in one day said, that guy's Stalin, we can't work with him, he's a psychopath. And I could see the innocence, I could see who he really was. And I said to him, you know, 5 people today said you're Stalin. And he said, oh, for fuck's sake, they must grow up. I've got an open door policy. I don't know what they're talking about. They're fucking wimps. This is an environment where... So he kept on defending his way as a leader, and completely invalidating the emotional impact that he was having on others. Complete denial, because he was incapable, because of the defense, of experiencing his own softness of heart. And it wasn't a choice, like, oh, I feel so soft and vulnerable, I better deny. These things kick in instantaneously and unconsciously. So it's a very careful process to make it safe enough for somebody to lower those defenses. And I haven't always been particularly good and sensitive at creating safety. It's like I'm going to smash through that thing. And I think maybe as an inexperienced coach, one can be quite rough when armed with Enneagram knowledge. So that's something that I continuously try and highlight now, is the importance of establishing safety, because the heart spontaneously opens when it feels safe. And you've got to appreciate the amount of trauma that causes such a strong defense mechanism. So you can almost directly correlate. If the client is incredibly defended, they needed that defense mechanism for very good reasons at some point in their life. So go easy, go gently. Anything you want to say there, Renata?
Just, the denial of the goodness. I had an aide client this week. She groomed and mentored a young woman underneath her in the team, and then promoted her up from the bottom level to manager, reporting to her. But now they had such a great relationship before. Now this woman's finding it really hard to work with her as a boss. And I'm working with a team, so I've had interactions with all of them. And her thing, she's made this statement in the coaching session because she's battling with this woman that she's worked so hard to get her mentored and promoted through the ranks. And she said, no good deed goes unpunished, like as if that's her motto. Kind of thing, it's like after everything that I've done to support this young woman in coming up through the ranks, and now she gets to the senior manager position, and this is the thanks that I get, that she's now, whatever the case may be. So also have an aide friend who would be in social interactions with me, and then afterwards say to me, when your friend said that, she was actually ridiculing you. And I'd go, oh, no, I don't think so. That's just, we've got this humor thing. No, she's ridiculing. And I constantly trying to point out negative intent in other people. So it's the denial of the goodness, and then just flat out denial, where, I've had eights receive the Enneagram report and go, this is complete rubbish, end of story. And they make those definitive speech acts, and that's that. And that's the end of it. It's like, this is all bullshit. So yeah, that's you. It's and it's quite strong, that denial. I had an aide who was Russian who told me that Chernobyl actually wasn't that bad. Which I thought was the ultimate epitome of denial. It's just the world's kind of bad propaganda against Russia. Chernobyl wasn't that bad. So that's...
Wow. Well, there you see that Stalin tendency, hey? Never mind how many millions of people we killed. Yeah.
Ingrid, it's Brian. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you speak about, let's say, from a coach's perspective, working with an aide. You've got to be kind of, you said, importance of establishing safety, go easy. Is that what you said? Yet we know that aides would like you to be direct and would like you to kind of stand in your own power and be able to meet them at that point, right? Otherwise, you're just playing into their hands, right? What would you say about that dilemma of a coach in addressing an aide?
So what I found is being direct and honest with an eight is being direct and honest about the fact that you see their vulnerability. And what I find with eights is when I see them as if all I can see is the innocence, and I talk to that, there's an instant connection and rapport and softening, And often when I work with eights, they'll say to me, please don't tell anyone. That, and sometimes I really baby them as a joke. Like I'll say, oh, Juju Baba. And I know, other coaches also have found that when they kind of nunu baba their eight clients, the eights really respond well because they feel seen, that somebody is actually seeing their true self. And that eights get plastered with so much of other people's projections, that people are so hostile to them, and it's so very, very hurtful to eights when they'll go to an Enneagram conference and they say, I'm an 8, and everyone kind of backs off and makes these negative judgments because they are so unbelievably sensitive and soft-hearted. So I'm always on a bit of a campaign to tell people that 8s are one of the most soft-hearted and sensitive types on the whole Enneagram. And if you can just see that as a coach, hone in on that innocence that I know you can see. I bet you there's not one person here who cannot see that innocence through all of that armor. I think it's very easy to see. I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I would have liked to have heard the other eights in the session now, like Lynn and Craig and that sort of thing, just to get their perspective.
Let's hear from Lynn. Hey, Lynn, please will you share my Nunu Baba?
Well, Nunu Baba is here.
I love you.
I love you. I think this is true. I mean, I have an 8 client who's a VP in one of the biggest, in the oil section of one of the biggest companies in the US, and he's so big, huge, and he is the softest person. And I think I started off with him just by saying, you know, everyone needs a soft place to land. And I think that comes directly from myself. To find a soft place to land is such a gift. And I use that phrase with him a lot. And, you know, I was in a session with him this week and he's crying. And it's such a privileged place to be, to hold that space for that quality to come forth. It's such a privileged place. But so, yeah, create a soft space for the 8s and they will melt.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Be that soft place where they can be vulnerable, and then you'll see what happens. There's a genuine flowering of the heart in safety and in connection. It's actually very beautiful. Thanks, Lynn.
I've found, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello, Papa.
Hello. Yeah, I found that being an 8, when I have an 8 client, helps a lot when they realize that I'm an 8 as well. I don't try and hide that fact at all. You know, for some of the other guys, I will keep it quiet, but I find with an 8 client, it's best just to say, I'm an 8 as well. That seems to break it down, and then I say, you know, they understand where if I challenge them, you know, the directness, they don't see it as an attack. They see it as like, okay, we're cutting the rubbish now. We're just getting to the heart of the matter. Yeah. Well, like I said, for other clients, I won't necessarily say what I am, but with an 8, I find it, my experience is, say you're an 8 as well. For them, it's almost like a relief, I find.
Yeah. Before we answer
Vanessa,
I just want to respond to Craig before we take Vanessa's point there. Craig, just reinforcing what you say, my sister's an 8, and 8s just howl when she coaches them. They cry and cry because she also babies them and is sweet and loving and lets them know she sees straight through them to that soft heart. But she also has that 8 thing of, I respect and love you enough to tell you the truth. And there's a very deep trust that comes from that. So yeah, I think that's probably some of what's behind it. Hey? I'm hearing you when you say direct.
Also, I just to Craig's point, I practice telling people that I'm an 8, purely for the and accentuating this softness. So just to kind of help, A, for my own benefit and kind of self-deprecation that I do with humor, but also to just to emphasize the soft mellow, the soft mushy part, and to try to help me see that the soft mushy part, the safe place to land, is where we both need to, that I try to create. It seems to disarm people. That's why I do it.
Yeah, thank you. Vanessa, if you can unmute and
yes.
Yeah.
I'm a social aide, so I agree totally with Craig and I guess Lynn. What I'm noticing though is that, yes, I would deny maybe my vulnerability. So for example, if I'm hurt, or I will be very much into denial that I am vulnerable and I will plow on. But this negative impact on others, I am so aware of that. I'm so aware of the behavior that I have on other people. So I really cannot resonate with this flat out and stubborn denial of their behavior and how it is problematic on others. Maybe that's a denial in itself, I don't know, but not from what I understand how people deal with me or know me. I don't see that as a flat out and stubborn denial on how other people feel.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. I see that as a difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the social subtype of 8 is the counter type. And if you need to belong and be successful socially and be part of a group, then I'm sure you need to be a lot more on that, because if you destroy relationships in that way, your social is going to be where you are most concerned as a social subtype. It's where the greatest preoccupation is. So that would be my interpretation. The social 8 is known as the softer 8. So, yeah, thanks for that. I think it's helpful to know that. Okay, can I go on to 9?
Ingrid, can I add something before you continue? It's Sylvia Baloyi. Yes,
Thanks.
yeah. I'm also an 8, and then for me, I have seen that people tend to open up a lot. You know, during my sessions, people will tell me things, and they'll tell me, you're the first person I've told. You know, I think because I'm able to do that, and I'm also what I tend to do is to give it straight to them, that if they are messing up, I'll tell them, you know, these are the options, but I'm straightforward with them. And for the most part, people then come back. They don't want to hear it at that time, but they come back and tell me at a later stage, you know, when you told me that thing, it actually changed everything for me. So it's being able to listen, and then also just to tell people straight, they can take it or leave it, but do it in a way that it's easier, you know, for them to understand. Thank you.
That thing of being able to establish trust, eh? Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. Okay, so
We are reaching time for our mid-session break. So your choice whether you do one more before we break or not.
okay, cool. So just one further thing about the 8 before we go to 2. I do want to do one more. 8 is a rejection defense. So we're in the rejection triad now, and 8s are trying to manage fear of rejection, fear of betrayal, fear of injustice, fear of being subject to someone else's power. And that rejection defense is a kind of preemption of being hurt. So that armoring up in the rejection triad. So let's go to the next one in the rejection triad is the 2. So again, in the heart center, it's about how do I get love and how do I avoid rejection. So a different form of a rejection defense. And in the case of 2, it's repression versus suppression. They're quite different. Suppression is a more mature defense mechanism, and it's an active thing of, this is not going to be the right feeling in this context. I want to be that, so I'm going to push those feelings away, and I'm going to try very hard to have the best feeling so that I walk away feeling good, rather than, you know, acting out my feelings in the moment. So for example, this morning, took my mother out for breakfast, get very triggered by her boring, long-winded saga stories about people that I don't know, but really just deciding I'm going to see if I can manage that triggering and be with her because I care about her, and just ignore. So that's suppression. It's like, that's not going to come out today. Repression is where you don't actually know what you feel. So 2s is the very externally focused type in the heart center. 6s are going to earn love by being focused on other people's needs. That is their modus operandi. They want to be loved, they want to be likable, and they're either going to do the helping and the serving of the two main standard Enneagram 2 types, the sexual and the social. The counter type is the 2. So the self-praised 2 is going to try and elicit love by being very warm, friendly, kind of cute in a way, childlike, disarming, charming, and that's their way of eliciting the love that they need and didn't get in the way that they needed it in childhood. And so they become very unconscious of their needs. In the case of self-praise, they much more have a sense of entitlement. But for the other two, it's a deep repression of their own needs. And often if you try and ask a 2 what their needs are, they'll say something like, I just need the people around me to feel good and be happy. They're so externally focused that they literally do not know what their own feelings are. Every now and then they'll go to 8 and they'll feel furious and their neediness will come out, but then they'll feel incredibly ashamed. So, and then they'll go back to trying even harder and negating their own feelings all over again. So it really is an unconscious repression, and they don't know that they are repressing. So it's a double covering up. Just to reiterate again, 2s aren't making a choice to say, I don't want these needs, I've got to care about someone else. They don't know what their needs are, and they don't know that they've pushed them aside. So what happens is they often have somatization. They often will experience their needs in the form of an illness or something like that, where things will manifest in a way that the body is saying, hello, here I am. So that's the kind of thing that happens with 2s. Any comments there, and then we have a break on the 2. Maybe any 2s who want to comment? Someone's unmuted. I heard something.
It was me that unmuted. I don't know if anybody else did. So just some of you might have had this experience when coaching 2s, but I just seen, and Getty, I'd love to hear from you because you have such wisdom around the 2, but I've seen 2 clients that own business, type 2 clients who own businesses get into real financial trouble in business through, in one instance, not being able to delegate or employ a next tier of managers because out of fear that they would destroy the nice family vibe in the business, that they wouldn't have enough heart, that they'd like come in and hold people accountable, which really needed to happen. And in another instance, a multiple entrepreneur type 2 who set up the partnerships that were supposed to be 50-50 in a very imbalanced way, where he was giving more, providing more, bailing the businesses out, and the partners, drew on that you'll just send more people, more money, blah, 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 and keep bailing out, and just about sunk his ship through, and then ironically through then being in a position where he didn't having to go back and demand more of the business partners, so the healing that came through the necessity of, I now need everybody that I'm in partnership with to step up and also bring to the party because I simply don't have any more to give. So, that's one of the manifestations. Getty, I'd love to hear from you.
I had an experience recently that really showed me this thing around approval. So I was working with a couple of groups of people, it was 90 people in all, in a bank on a leadership development program. And at the end of it, there was an evaluation. And more than 85% of the people scored the program above 8. And there was one person who scored the program as a 3. And everything else disappeared for me as I lay in my bed thinking, now, who did I not please? How did I fail? There was somebody I just didn't pick up. Maybe it's this online damn thing that I couldn't see I wasn't meeting someone's needs. And it took me a while to write myself back to, hang on, but most people really found this helpful. but that need for approval is so driving. And of course, as you work more on your stuff, it becomes clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that story of yours, Renata, is very instructive, because that person went to the humility, that is the virtue of two, and acknowledged, oh, I'm only human. The false abundance fixation, they saw through it. They realized, okay, if I'm going to turn this thing around, the best thing I can do is ask for help. And maybe you led the person there. What is humility in this situation? I've seen social twos completely carpet bomb their business, like fire everyone, close the business in that rage and vengeance at having been taken advantage of, and sink the ship themselves in that rage. So I think that's a very good example of the upward spiral to the virtue of humility. Like, I can't be God's little helper on earth saving everyone. I'm just a normal human with finite resources, versus the inability to be humble, that is incredibly destructive in the end, self-destructive and very hurtful to others.
Yeah. Shall we have tea? Cool.
How long do you want?
So it's 33, so let's be back at 1:45, so 12 minutes.
12
Back
is
at
good.
1:45,
Thank
whatever hour
you.
you find yourself in. See you in a bit.
Cha-cha. But we're clearly going to go over time. I'm going to move on to the next one in the rejection triad, which is 5. So 5s have also a more blanket defense as one of the withdrawal types. So 9, 4, and 5 as withdrawal types are more withdrawn from both parents and the context as a whole, not particularly just reacting to one of the archetypes. So their defense mechanisms tend to be more end to end. So 5s involve the isolation, also the externalization of their power, as with all head center types, and needing to find a sense of safety and mastery through accumulating knowledge, being knowledgeable, being seen as knowledgeable. So the externalization comes through that being seen in that way, and needing to be isolated. So wanting to avoid people's emotions and expectations. So it's almost attributing to others the power to make them feel overwhelmed. So the defense mechanism of isolation keeps them from feeling that overwhelm. The isolation is not just from the world, the internal isolation is from their own feelings. So that compartmentalization involves a compartmentalization of feeling and thinking, and also disconnection from their own body. So that's 5's form of defense. And if we've got some 5s here, I know Kevin, maybe if you back and you're here, if you can maybe comment on isolation as a defense mechanism and maybe the way through it, like how to notice it kicking in and easing through it. What would support that in maybe coaching a 5? People struggle with coaching 5s because they can be quite intimidating and seem to be aloof. And it's a clever strategy for avoiding sensitivity. So let's hear from you.
Oh man, I'm a 5-2-8 tri-type, which is just like you said, I think earlier, a triple whammy of some things going on with emotions. You know, to deny and repress the emotions with 2 and 8, but 5, the way through it, I think you asked me to speak to is really, I think, about responding to my need to isolate instead of trying to repress that as well. If I deny that I have a need or I repress my need, to just remove myself from something that's overwhelming my nervous system or overwhelming my sense of being or perspective, then I will do it. I will stay like present physically, but I am completely checked out on the inside. And you can see it. I've seen it in a mirror, or I've seen it reflected back to me, where my face closes and my whole body just constricts. I feel tension, and it's quite an uncomfortable experience to continue to stay around people or around situations that are overwhelming for me. And so I did this recently. I was triggered with something. This is a time of year for me where the weather and just the general time of year is bringing up emotions from 3 years ago. And I had something happen where I isolated recently for almost a day and a half. And it was not it was not pretty, and it was not fun for anyone, but I communicated that to people around me and said, I need to just be alone, and I need to go process everything that's happened in this situation. And at the end of it, I noticed all of my defense mechanisms, and I just let them run. I didn't try to stop them. I didn't try to divert them to some other outlet. I just noticed the criticism, the self-hatred, the hatred of others that was popping up, the blaming. So many ugly, ugly things came up in this, but I waited until my brain and my emotions and my defense patterns were just absolutely exhausted. And when I was exhausted, it was like a weight had lifted off of my shoulders. I needed to go take care of like nutritional needs. So I did that, and then I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I felt incredibly different. If I had tried not to do that, I would have gone lower 8. I've done it so many times where and by lower, I just mean, the negative patterns of 8, where I would become too much. I would project that, and then I would just bowl people over with emotion. I would anger, I think you've used the word spiky, Ingrid. It's at that point, my cactus needles just come out, and I'm poking everyone around me, indicating to them that I need more space. When I stop doing that and projecting it onto other people, and I don't even have a 6, my dominant wing is not 6, it would be 4, but I can see that projection come out where I'm looking and pointing and blaming at other people and realizing, you know what, I think this is actually my problem. And I think I need to isolate, I need to go withdraw, and I need to process it alone. Because if I stay around other people, I'm not gonna do the work personally. I'm gonna look at where I'm seeing other people's faults. And man, am I good at that as a 5. I can see what's really gonna trigger you, and that can turn into gaslighting like in half a breath. If I can get you irritated and defensive and spiky, then you're going to lose it. And then I can show you and convince you that it's your problem instead of mine. But man, at the core, at the root, I was the one that was triggered. And I've completely washed myself of that and blinded myself that it's not me, it's other people. Not good at all. And I don't have a choice. This is the real trick for a 5. I don't have a choice at that point, because I've isolated myself through being hateful, through being mean to other people. They leave me, and then I have no choice but to be alone. And that's a horrible experience for me. If I do it first, then I have some sort of maintaining control over my experience and my relationship. Excuse me, my relationships are not harmed. I can take care of myself and then come back and communicate to people, hey, here's what was going on with me, and I've got these issues, kind of resolved and fixed.
Wow. So what I'm really hearing there is a very big distinction between a conscious need to take some time out and process versus an unconscious isolation where it's spiky, hateful, going to the low end of 7, which is very hateful, very judgmental. The low end of 7 looks very much like a kind of hateful, judging low end of 1. So I'm hearing like the unconscious versus the conscious. Taking time out, stepping back, let me go and process with awareness, let me self-reflect, bringing the best of the reflective capabilities of the head center to notice what's going on, but you haven't acted it out unconsciously. So I would see that as a huge difference. So even if it's not pretty and it's painful, there's a painful self-recognition in these patterns. You've taken the time before inflicting the pain. So,
and that I'm actually hateful to myself.
Mm.
That's what I notice when I isolate or when I withdraw from my own, consciously, as you're saying, that what I'm noticing is my inner dialogue is vicious and cruel. And if I just watch those patterns spiral in my own head or in my own heart and don't act on them, I don't talk about it. I just allow them to just unspool as if I've been wound so tightly that I can't be wound anymore. And that spring has to uncoil. When it's done, it's done. And then I don't even have to address all of the hatefulness that came up. I don't have to have an answer for all of the feelings and emotions and negativity that came in that experience. It's just gone.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's so self-revealing and so helpful. And I just want to point out that malice and hatefulness and self-hatred is actually very much part of the low end of 7. One of the features of the low end of 7 is malice, and going to the low end of 1 involves a very judgmental form of the low end of 1 tinged with a particular flavor of 7 malice, and it's also rationalized, is why it's a good idea to be hateful. So that's kind of built in around the kind of low end of 7, which you haven't really mentioned. I mean, you kind of characterize it as a bit 8ish, but I think from a kind of technical learning from an Enneagram perspective, it's important to know the low end of 7. That's in what you say.
Oh, I agree. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. That's very helpful. But the other part of the question is, if you weren't to isolate, what kind of presence would create enough safety for you not to need to, where you could actually express that soft vulnerability that is part of your line to the high end of 8, the innocent, soft heart that people mirror back to you all the time. What kind of presence would you need to not need to do that?
I think it depends on the level of intensity in the experience. For me, there's a point where if I notice that I have that I am in such a mood or such a denial state, that other people are beginning to be uncomfortable and not, for me, I use the word location all the time. I think agreement is maybe one of the words that people use for 5 in the Enneagram world, but for me, location is more important than agreement. Location precedes agreement. And if I've lost myself and I don't even know where I'm at, and I begin hurting other people, and I can see it on their faces, almost the first notice I have of it is if I've done something and the other person becomes physically uncomfortable around me, that's the first cue for me that I'm missing something on the inside. And so at that point, if I've checked out and lost my own awareness or my own location, there's really no recovery from that by staying in the situation. For their sake, almost, I have to say, I've got to go find myself. And once I've located myself, I can come back and communicate that vulnerability. If I've located myself or I know where I'm at, then the answer is quite different. It's to stay, and it's to be honest and vulnerable and open. But man, if I've lost that sense of knowing where I'm at or knowing where the other person is, I'm only going to continue to press forward. For me, and I don't know if all 5s are this way, I'm sexual dominant and 4-wing, if that gives some context to this as well. Boy, I have to get away from the person I'm hurting, or I'm going to keep hurting them until I've really confused them. And I'm so good, man, it's not good. It's not good at all, but I'm so accurate with my ability to see what's going on with the other person in those cases, that if all I know is what I don't like about that person, that's the location that I'll just laser in on. And it burns the other person so much so that I just have to turn off and go, I got to go find where I'm at so I can put my laser where it belongs and not blind you.
Yeah. And 5, 2, and 8 in your Tritap are all unbelievably intuitive as well. Yeah. Thank you. Wow. Very helpful insights. Renata, I don't know if you want to comment anything about that. You've also got a 5 somewhere in your tri-type. Anything you can say about isolation?
No, just I know that what we're hearing from Kevin is just such a beautiful example of bringing conscious awareness to your defense mechanism. And observing it and not acting it out, and so I think part of the discussion is around when we notice it, what do we do, right? Instead, and it's not about resisting it or denying it or trying to push it away. It's just about bringing that level of awareness. And I also find it quite ironic that the answer is the isolation, but in a very conscious way for conscious purpose, whereas otherwise the isolation is very different. And 5s have the capacity also to end friendships and end associations as the ultimate form of isolation, is I will cut you out of my life, and they can do that, which is that defense mechanism, probably an extreme. And then you also, of course, see the denial sometimes with the 5s. But yeah, I won't say more than that. I think Kevin's given us a masterclass.
Absolutely. Thank you. Cool. Okay, so we've looked at the 8, the 2, and the 5 as rejection defenses. Now we're going to go into the frustration defenses. And in the frustration triad, it's very much about having had something as a child, but not quite enough, and wanting more of it. So how do you get more? And the defense mechanisms here are around not getting enough. So in the 1, we start with the gut center. So the 1 is about a reaction against one's own instinctual impulses, which were never allowed in childhood. So the 1 is usually has a problematic relationship to the authority archetype in early childhood. So it could be the father, it could be the mother, but it's someone strict and repressive on the one hand, where they couldn't have their instincts or be spontaneous. So they were subject to that repressive authority, which meant that they had to disavow their true feelings, their spontaneous reactions, and very much from the solar plexus down, where all the gut center impulses arise. So it's sexual energy, instinctual energy, not allowed. So then the defense mechanism is reaction formation. So instead of my instinctual and spontaneous feelings, I have to have the right feelings. So it's adopting the right face for the right context. And that face is very consciously chosen. Whereas in the 2, they don't realize they've repressed their feelings. The 1s actually push their feelings away and try and pretend to be feeling something that's more appropriate to context. So they won't allow themselves to be angry in a professional context because anger in that context is not appropriate. So they're going to show up according to the situational and contextual demands and push that anger away. It's not just anger, it's also other impulses, playfulness, sexuality, depending on the subtype. And then what else do I want to say about that? Yeah, reaction formation, the kind of formal definition there is transforming the feeling to its opposite. But we can all feel it, right? Like 1 is pretending to be sweet, but you can feel that seething anger underneath because they haven't fully repressed it. It's still somewhere there. And one of the powerful things for 1s is to realize that people do feel their anger filling a room, and that if they can express and hold it and almost not be afraid of their own feelings. For 1s, it's to really embody their feelings and to be able to contain those very powerful instinctual impulses that are arising and to be with them. And that's part of the serenity virtue, is being able to accept oneself and to understand that those impulses are a natural part of life, not to be able to push them away, and to kind of trust one's goodness. The lost childhood message of one is you are good. So when one's learned to trust their goodness and their integrity and their desire for something good, which includes their instinctual impulses, then they can ease out of this reaction formation and get more into the serenity. I don't know if anyone wants to comment there on one. Have I left something out?
I have in my notes of a one defense mechanisms, another one called projective identification, projecting what is not good or right onto others, then criticizing and becoming a slave driver to fix them.
Yeah, for sure. That's true. Yeah, the fixing. And that's also the sexual subtype is more about, it's the counter type of fixing others. So it's less about repressing one's own feelings than fixing other people. And being on a big mission about that. A kind of zealotry. And very self-justified. I had a client come, a potential client, she came for a chemistry session the other day. And she told me an anecdote about how she lost it with her neighbor and he lied and no. And she completely rationalized the whole thing. I'm right and he's wrong. And she could see that I wasn't really buying it. And I think I chased her away because, you know, she didn't want to go there. It's like, oh no, I don't really have time for coaching. I was like, go for it. I didn't really want to work with her. She was so full of self-righteous rage. It's like, oh, this is going to be hard work. No, thanks. I'm not up for it.
Marx is the one in the room. Marx, do you want to comment at all about your experience of this?
Not really. Just just that sometimes it's like that in a moment. I might have bumped into somebody that actually I'm pissed off with, but I'll present with a nice face, because I suppose because I don't know what else to do sometimes, and then they walk away and I go, well, what was that about, type of thing. So that's the one. But the other is also just so often like noticing the instinctive reaction, feeling mad or feeling whatever it is. But, you use the word inappropriate. It might be like, what's the wrong thing to do? It's the right thing to do to, like not go there, or not to, erupt or whatever that is. And so a lot of the learning for me has been to just show up to what's really going on and be honest with myself before I can begin to decide what am I going to do with that. And it also has it took me a long time to see it. Because I think it's about being a good person. It's about, that's the person I want to be. I don't want to be somebody who, if I give in to this instinctive response, who knows what's going to happen? I'm going to destroy relationships. I'm going to hurt people. I don't want to do that. That's not the person I want to be. So it all sounds so, I can talk myself a good story. And actually sort of looking at the underbelly of that and realizing actually it's not serving anybody. It's not serving me. It's not serving the other. And really talking to my children and realizing, as they hold up the mirror, no, we can see you are really smashed about that. But I thought I was doing such a good job of containing myself. So, lots of that. But, it's, yeah. I don't know if that helps anybody, but that's lots of that type of stuff. And that's the dialogue, because I'm a self-praise. So there's this enormous sort of, coming back in with the judgment, disappointment with myself, shame, how could I have done that? And so when when I do respond instinctively, I'm very often, just go to shame afterwards. Like, I shouldn't have done that. Why? That type of stuff.
Yeah.
The has been, it's not all bad. No, it's okay. Sometimes it's even appropriate. Yeah.
And noticing that line to the low end of 4, the darkest of shame possible on the entire Enneagram is down there. And and that relentless drive to be a good person, even in this conversation, that kind of genuine desire to find a way of working with this, and the fear that those instinctual impulses are going to wreak havoc. And what Almas and Maitri talk about is, how do you hold the intensity of those impulses with self-compassion, with presence, allowing for it, not needing to do the opposite, not needing to hide it, and 7s go to the low end of that as well. It's like, okay, but it comes out. It really comes out.
And I think that's where the learning is, is like realizing the self-deception of it, realizing like, this doesn't actually wash. This reasoning, it works, but it's not taking me anywhere,
And being able to loosen up in the process with a deep self-compassion. That it's not about being better and this isn't working, but getting to a point of deep self-compassion about one's kind of innate goodness, that with these impulses, with the darkest of what everyone's got as a human being, the potential for violence and whatever we're capable of, that there's still a basic goodness. I think that's the real key, is self-acceptance.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right.
So for you, it would be noticing, when am I choosing a face?
Yes.
And really
and asking myself, what am I, just doing that constant check-in. What am I really feeling?
Yeah.
What's really going on here? And then how do I want to respond?
And seeing what's kind of underlying the anger. I always see anger as a lid on other feelings, because in the heart center, in the gut center, we find the dying heart, the shattered heart, and the grief-stricken heart, which is about seeing the suffering of the world, the injustice, the brokenness. One's really feeling a grief at the way the world is sometimes, at their own unwelcomeness of themselves as they are in their early childhood context, at the neglect, at the, all the things they want to fix, most of all their sense of being wrong or defective or bad in some way. And it's understanding that the anger kind of hides grief. For the 9, the narcotization and the sloth hides sadness. And in the 8, it hides the vulnerability and the deep hurt of having witnessed injustice and deep power imbalance, usually in early childhood, or betrayal. So I find that quite helpful in the gut center, is not stopping at anger. I don't think it's the underlying feeling of the gut center. It's more like grief, shame, and anxiety and terror for the centers, rather than anger, shame, and fear. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm seeing with the heart wounds and the just kind of secondary versus primary emotions. I don't know. It's up for debate. Maybe a question if we do another session on the heart wounds and the centers.
So, Ing, what were you saying? Grief for the body center, shame for the heart center, and fear for the head center.
Yeah, like terror, actually.
Terror for the head center.
Yeah.
So grief, shame, and terror.
It's like landing on this planet as a completely vulnerable and helpless human being. You discover things about the way it is around here that are really difficult, and then you need this ego strategy and structure and defenses and layers and buffers to be able to actually be here as a human being, and it's not easy. Okay, cool. Can I go on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so, but compassion, the only key. Okay, 4, introjection. So 4s are going to do positive introjection around idealized things that they think are going to make them special. And they are going to do negative introjection around the things that make them feel defective and not special. So introjection leads to that sense of very deep defectiveness, inability to belong. So the introjection is also, there's a withdrawal defense here. As I said, 9, 4, and 5 in the withdrawal triad. In the Hurwitz, the frustration of not feeling a belonging with both parents, feeling invisible, not loved, not seen. So 4s kind of start thinking, what's wrong with me? Sometimes 4s will have a sibling who gets all the attention, and they start thinking there's something really wrong with me, and if they get negative treatment or rejection, they're going to take that on board in a big way. So I'm sure if you've got 4 friends, something bad happens, there's a breakup, they'll ask you, what's wrong with me? Tell me, is there something really badly wrong with me? These are the kinds of questions my 4 friends ask me if someone rejects them romantically or they can't find a partner, they're single for a while, they're like, what's wrong with me? Even in that thing of just wanting to find an ideal partner, when they're in a relationship, they don't feel loved enough. So the frustration is a desire for love and connection and belonging that is unmet in their early childhood experience. So it's, I'm not special to them. How am I going to feel special within myself? So how am I going to craft an identity that I think is special? Primarily, it's not just about looking special. It's how am I going to feel special and adequate? So that's the defense mechanism here. And what's interesting with 4 is sometimes we think 4s are deeply in touch with themselves and their own feelings. Not at all. Every one of the types is self-disconnected in some very, very important way. So 4s fall into the trap of authenticity. It's not real. It's a manufactured idea of the self. So that they need to feel okay. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all, this manufactured self. They know that it's not real. It's some deep, essential level. And the stabbed heart, the pain, the deep, physical, tangible pain in a 4 heart, and the envy of other people being loved, the envy of other people seemingly feeling like they're okay. Very, very painful. You can see the melancholy of walking around thinking there's something wrong with you and constantly comparing yourself to other people who seem like they're okay, and you just not. So yeah, anyone want to comment on that? Anything to add? People with a 4 in their tri-type.
Well, we've got Chris and Rez and Manya are 4s in the room.
Yeah, please can you add anything? Have I said the right thing? Am I on track?
Corin has her hand raised, and then Chris.
Cool.
So I have a 4 client that I've been working with for quite some time, and she has a deep held belief that her life is everybody else's worst nightmare, which is very heavy to work with. And it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back, and then we'll address it and we'll have a look at it, and then it'll come up somewhere else. So she has this fixation that her life is everybody else's worst nightmare, which is that whole ego comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the addiction to melancholy. We've all got our addiction, and in fours, it's an addiction to unhappiness, because that's something that they can sort of control, is the introjection and the busyness with the project of self. Not, it's no worse or better than anyone else's ego strategy. It's just a very difficult place to be.
Chris, you unmuted?
Oh, my dog's even sad behind me. So yeah, I'm feeling sad just listening to you talking. And all of a sudden I felt sad for no reason.
Yeah.
And it, you know, you wrote the tagline of my life, Christopher Samsa, what's wrong with me? It's followed me around. I am the middle child. You know, my elder brother is the grown-up, my younger brother is the spoiled baby, and there wasn't room for me. And, you know, I can even in my mind pinpoint the day that I was rejected by both of my parents in my story. Yeah, I resonated quite a lot with what, sorry, I can't remember the name of.
Corin.
No, the gentleman.
Kevin.
Kevin was saying earlier about this withdrawal as well. And my one line as well, you know, I'm completely unable to hide. I think I'm putting on a really brave face or being happy or, but, you know, people see right through it, see the anger within me that just is seething underneath. And yeah, looking out into the world and seeing loss and what I don't have. So yeah, I'm too sad to continue, sorry.
Yeah. And Chris, as like a self-praise 4, does that take the form of feeling cared for and secure? Because what Oranio speaks about in the self-praise is a genuine sense that the universe is looking after other people better than me.
Is that me, Ingrid, that you're asking that, or is it Chris?
I'm asking Chris as self-praise 4. Maybe you can contribute after. I mean, it would be lovely to hear your perspective. Chris, is there anything that you can say to that, or are you feeling too tender?
No, it's stumped me. I can't answer that question. Because half of me, I think, would immediately say, yes, woe is me, everyone else is looked after by their partners, by their family, by the universe. Everyone is looking after them and no one is looking after me. But the other half of me doesn't connect with that. So it feels really split. So I can't give a definitive response to it.
And maybe it's worth asking which parts are telling you what. Because I've heard you be very self-brutalizing before, and even saying that thing, woe is me, is like an 8 superego brutalization, which might have helped you somewhere along the way. But I don't know. I want you to be kinder to yourself, please.
Thank you.
I'm saying Nunu Baba to the 8 in you.
Thank you.
So Rez is a self-praise, and then Manya's had her hand up for a while as well as a SOS. But let's hear from Rez just as another self-praise.
Yeah, I don't, very similar to Chris, I don't entirely relate to that Uranio's description. As usual in this presentation of introjection, Ingrid, like I find helpful nuance in here, because this is not always something that I can observe it, but not always. I've wondered whether this works with me. Like I can really feel myself, say I was with a guy for a couple of years whose partner had died from cancer young, and I just remember like really and I do it a lot, just bringing in or internalizing someone else's emotional experience. And I wonder whether that's me doing introjection as a way to, you know, again, just as a way to experience intensity. I don't know, but I see myself do that quite a lot, and it, of course it's helpful in one way as a coach. There is like there's an empathy piece there that's useful, but yeah, there's something unhealthy about it as well.
Yeah, I get you. One of the people on one of the groups, Enneagram Opening, spoke about as a 4 facilitator. She suddenly realized the craving for intensity, and she said, I got off on people crying in the group, and she felt a kind of self-horror about it. So I think that noticing oneself, that the empathy has also got an element of, as you said, it's looking for intensity. But I don't know, I'm not like connecting the dots to introjection in that. And I know that the self-praise is the counter type, so possibly worth exploring that a bit more. I mean, maybe how do you, when you say nuance in this, what do you feel is adding some nuance?
So I mean, for instance, I've never linked negative introjection with, you know, what you said about blaming, the blame response. I mean, that's just instant. I'm like exactly like your friends in that. As soon as something goes wrong, it's like, well, that must have been me. I mean, that must be about me. So I hadn't connected that with negative introjection, but it's kind of clear now that is positive introjection. I just think that's probably pretty pervasive. Like maybe everything I'm doing is about a way to prove value or something. I don't know. Need to think on it some more, and I just find this material so so tender, isn't it? And just
it's really, really is, and that's why that thing of compassion, self-compassion, gentleness, the Enneagram is such a very precise naming of our struggles, that if we don't have compassion in using this and holding this, it can really be vicious. So, you know, we have to notice how we're holding it. We have to notice our intention and being very careful with it. So, but that thing of negative introjection, it's not just what people say. It's the interpretation of the entire context, the world, my belonging, why I'm not what I thought I should be. You know, I've got a young friend who's a 4, and I wanted to be married. I wanted to have kids by this age. I thought I would have a career that was fulfilling. And there's something wrong with me so fundamentally that I haven't done any of the things that I fantasized about. So it's that also that imagination of the future that doesn't happen, and you know that really negative self-judgment that is a lot of our ego is about not being able to live reality on its own terms with gratitude and presence, and knowing that what is exactly happening to me right this second is my life. This is my life. This is what has meaning. This is what is touching me. And this is what is transforming me. And all our ego strategy is a way of keeping the actual what is at bay in some way or another. And introjection is also one of those things, you know.
The connection I'm making to my brutal 8 is in response to the stabbed heart, you know, because I think out of everything, as I've been learning about the Enneagram, that is the thing that just feels so perfect. The response to that, the feeling of it, and, you know, it can come from a tiny one word out of place from somebody. And it doesn't bounce off like Teflon. It goes, you know, super deep. And I think my 8 in my tri-type is what responds to that. And so when I then turn that on myself with this introjection, that becomes very powerful against me as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it can be not what someone says. It can be something that you see. You can see somebody doing something that you thought you should do, or that they're more able to express themselves, or they're more able to relate to people. It can be anything that you witness that then gets interjected as a stab of what's wrong with me. So it's much more broad spectrum pain than a lot of people understand, you know. Yeah. Manya, you had your hand up. Great. Thank you.
I do. I'm resonating completely with all the stuff being said. What I'm wanting to feeling that sensitivity and tenderness. You know, I always have this thing, as I think I've mentioned this before, you know, wanting to lift the full thing, you know, of and how I'm feeling like doing that now is the stuff of how, you know, I would get so, you know, when it's a matter of tumbling into a kind of abyss of not belonging and almost getting frozen there. You know, there was a wonderful YouTube documentary that I was witnessing about these young kids who literally froze and couldn't talk. And, you know, I mean, it's that agonizing and that painful, you know, that one can actually go there. But now where I'm wanting to lift it is how, you know, with the Enneagram and the awareness of, hang on, this is kind of what's going on. And, you know, practicing that sense of presence and compassion, also recognizing defenses, like going to the 7, you know, where I can sort of get, you know, I can start feeling really special and then get really buoyant and, you know, just trying to balance that at times. But what I found a really interesting trigger to watch recently is when I'm feeling misunderstood. So then it's a matter of like, hang on, what am I doing here? And also beginning to see myself as like, where am I, what am I feeling, and what in fact are my needs for, you know, where I can go. That's not just now, you know, too excited. And the visionary is what really comes, you know. I was going to say to my rescue, I'm thinking of Katie saying in one of our sessions with me, with my, you know, with my ex too, you know, that there's a sense of the 1 and the 7 and the 4 and the functionality of coaching and just really being able to serve.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
and
that's
to do that well.
Yeah. That line to 1 about the transmutation towards the good and the focus and the kind of dignity that one's bring down that line is like, I'm going to give up some of the suffering and focus on what's necessary in the moment. That's what the real gift of 1 is that very unselfish presence in the world with what's needed here and now, with no agenda really. So, and it's also interesting that a lot of what you say is about social concern, belonging, social anxiety, social freeze, being misunderstood is very much a social phenomenon. Is, oh my God, I'm all alone. It's a very tough place to be. So thanks for that insight, and also the reminder that the tri-type elements are coming in, and you know, there's a sequence of going to things for backup, and also backup in the dark side as well as backup in some of the upward journey. Thanks for that.
Question.
Gail.
Hi, can I ask you a question? I recently did an Enneagram for type 4, and it was, all of this was spot on. And she felt it was absolutely accurate, and we talked about it. Now, this particular girl has actually been diagnosed with personality disorder. But in fact, you know, that's we talked about labels, but a lot of what is diagnosed as is actually a lot about being a 4, as I saw it. I wonder what your comment is on that. And I haven't worked with her, and I'm not going to. And
Yeah.
but
So
you know, there's that whole other aspect.
Yeah. So I think
So
there
this
is,
could actually,
yeah. So Naranjo, as a psychiatrist, attached diagnoses to the lowest end of each type. So paranoid schizoid, psychopathy, narcissistic personality disorder. So literally things from the DSM-3 at that stage. It's now 5 or 6, I've lost track. But diagnoses for that most unhealthy level. So if that person is in crisis or is really struggling or is deeply traumatized and is floundering in themselves to find ground, then it would look like a personality disorder. You know, extreme dissociation in 5 will look kind of schizoid. And, you know, if you listen to someone like Bessel van der Kolk or Peter Levine talking about trauma, he says we all have dissociative personality disorder. We all have multiple personality disorder. We just don't have it as badly as someone who's been diagnosed. So I think we need to be very aware of the construction of madness in society, and that in the West we've got this diagnostic and statistical manual with diagnostic criteria. That would be handled very differently in a traditional society where there was a healthy fabric. You know, that person would be held differently. So I think, I don't know, I'm incredibly careful around even going anywhere near those kind of labels, and obviously also appreciating the level of traumatization that takes people there. I mean, I know one person who's a 4 happens to have been diagnosed with borderline, but he was beaten to within an inch of his life as a young child, and he had to hide away in the cupboard. Surprise, surprise, there's a label that you can attribute. You know, people with complex post-traumatic stress disorder are sometimes diagnosed with autism or vice versa, you know. So I think we need to hold the disciplines with care, not see people as a label, but also at the same time appreciate some of the science behind the psychiatry, like Sevens, that mania, extreme mania, then crashing, doing really stupid shit when they're manic, and then crashing and going into absolute suicidal despair. Maybe there is some support, you know, in a medication that's going to be a mood stabilizer. And creating those conditions of support is going to support the person's finding sobriety. So, I don't know, I suppose I've got my own way of integrating these things, but the core thing that makes me feel more at ease is just seeing a person as a person with compassion. And I don't know, what's your sense?
yeah, no, it's just a label. My sense was if perhaps working with this, I just felt, well, why have this label hanging over you when actually it's about facing who you are and working with it? Because the label is so negative.
Yeah, and if you think there's something wrong with me, oh yes, there's something really wrong with me, and it's on page 743 of the DSM, you know. And how do you even remotely establish a positive sense of self if you feel like you're in the trash can?
Exactly. So yeah, it was sad for me because it's somebody I know's daughter. So yeah,
it's really tough. So yeah, what could be in place to support that person to develop the virtue of 4 is equanimity. And you know what I found with 4 is because they go through all the stuff, when they develop a sense of equanimity, there's like a stoical quality about it where they're able to transmute it in a way that is really inspiring. Like even this friend of mine who, you know, was beaten so badly, out of that, he has chosen the light in the most profound possible way, in the way of the one knowing goodness, knowing. And he's got such a beautiful ethos around when you can choose kindness, why choose anything else? and the beauty of what he brings out of that suffering through the process of finding an inner balance is so exquisite. And I hold, maybe it's a sexual 7 complete idealistic rose-colored spectacles, is that everybody channels their virtue and brings it in some way or another. You know, that I hold undying hope for every person. Jeffrey Dahmer, my kids joke with me. It's like, if you met Jeffrey Dahmer, you'd invite him for coffee. So take everything I say with a huge pinch of salt. I'm
Yeah,
deluded.
but you know, Ingrid, I'm dying to say this since you've mentioned this, because I was mentioning what had happened, you know, with that frozen state as well, of like plummeting in like such an, you know, agonizing, envious, left out state. What was amazing was the sense of equanimity, and I don't know if the other fours have a sense of that, of being able to see it. There was always a sense of an observer. I was watching it with equanimity. You know, it's that thing, it's almost like I think of that now with the thing of fours, being able to actually witness pain and then be able to see and be with it. So it also can transmute, you know, that even then, all those many years ago when I didn't know this stuff, you know, there was that sense of really being able to just watch.
Yes, I have
You know?
seen that so much, and triggers the 4 in me of why can't I do that? Because I've seen 4s really do that. They can tolerate immense amounts of depression and despair and our existential condition and prevail at some level.
Yeah, it is quite incredible. I mean, it's something that I think of as, you know, like when they say you're sort of superhuman, what's your superhero strength or whatever, you know, superpower, yeah. It's like, well, okay, I've just walked through fire over hot coals, or, you know, and like, here I am, you know, even while I might be completely losing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quite something, yeah.
All right, I'm channeling my inner 3, my external 3, my unashamed 3. It's time for 7 because we can't shorten
Man,
each
I was
other.
hoping we were gonna miss 7 and I could rationalize it.
We got loads of 7. We got.
Bye, everyone. Gotta go. Okay, here's 7 for you.
Love it.
Yeah, so for 7s, the heart wound is the starving heart. The frustration defense mechanism is, how am I going to fill the starving heart and grasping and attachment? In Buddhism, there's this image of the hungry ghost, and it's one of the worst realms as reincarnated into the realm of the hungry ghost, where you feed and feed and feed and you're attached and you never ever satiated. So 4s are both trying to do that externally, but also attached to the idea of a self. So there's the ego fraudulence that comes with 7 of trying to manufacture a self and a life that they don't feel they have. So that loss of holy wisdom, holy plan, loss of a sense of meaning and the universe making any sense at all. So, and the torment of not being able to be with the inner void, with the big nothing, and the terror of that existential hole. And so avoiding it at all costs, like the actual pain of the moment and the need to feed on something, try and find security, whether it's self-praise, in things, in allies, in opportunity, or sexual, in some kind of sense of positivity, being unable to face reality on its own terms at all, needing to reframe instantly, the defense mechanism of also reframing, and the instant rationalization. So it's rationalizing the way things are, things that go wrong, one's failures, one's being rejected, that very instantaneous rationalization of why it's actually for the good, why it's for the better. I've often told the anecdote of a friend whose house burnt down on the Saturday night, and on the Monday she was at work, and I was like, what the hell are you doing here? I heard your house burnt down. And she says, I feel so free. And not that long later, there was the implosion that was actually appropriate. The emotional breakdown, the loss, the realization of the loss, the trauma, the realization that this is the kind of stuff that actually does happen to human beings. It's part of life to go through this kind of hectic shit. And that's very, very, very difficult for sevens to accept, that life includes such profound suffering. And when people say sevens lack empathy, it's not really that. It's that it's too difficult to face other people's pain, because it means that that's what pain is around. And that might happen to me too, and it might happen to someone I love. So it's like, how the hell do I get away from this pain as quickly as possible? So that's the kind of stuff that sevens do, is self-symbolize. So it's going into the map. Go into the map. Stay away from the territory. The territory is hardcore. You can get run over by a bus any second. You can jump off a cliff. No one's going to stop you. But on the map, that can't happen. So that's also why 7 would love something like the Enneagram, because then I don't have to face the terrible insecurity of actually potentially being really wounded in relationship, because I can distance myself and relate to this person as a type and try and keep emotional distance. And then, if the relationship breaks down, I'm going to have a story about why it was for the best. So it's an incredible fear of pain and deprivation that drives this rationalization. And also rationalizing one's unacceptable impulses. Like if I have to exploit somebody to find security, 7s will do that. You'll see with self-praise 7s, they sometimes have the dollar signs in their eyes. You can actually feel that they're looking at you thinking you're an opportunity. Or a sexual 7, you can feel that they're actually feeding on your soul because of their desire for intimacy and connection. But then people feel dumped because you're their best friend and you love them and you're so connected with them, but then suddenly you somewhere else, B. Chestnut jokes about the fact that a 7 can say, let's go on holiday to Turkey in September, and no. And then next thing you see on Facebook, they're on holiday in Turkey with someone else. So, 7s hurt people and dump them because of that insatiability and susceptibility to temptation and desire for novelty. They cause a lot of hurt. And the social 7 has a gluttony for being seen as good. So there, it's difficult to be gluttonous socially, so you have to turn it around. So how do I get my needs met? Socially, it's by a gluttony for applause, a gluttony for positive regard. And it's a good strategy for getting that is by being very self-sacrificing, generous, whatever. So that's the 7 story. All based
Well,
on
I see Nick nodding his head. So Nick's nodding his head. So let's hear Nick.
Nick recently re-diagnosed himself. Tell us, Nick.
I find it extremely fascinating how the tri-type really plays into this. It plays into the downward spiral, and it plays into the upward spiral as well, because for me there's a very strong sense of like I want experience and connection, but because of this 4 part of me which feels like there's something wrong with me and society doesn't like me because of that, and they shouldn't, because everybody should get along and be friends and everything should be fine, but they don't. So now I'm isolating myself, and while I'm isolating and interjecting and busy with like all the stuff inside, I get to a point where I deny that I'm hungry for connection and experience.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you reverse that and go up the spiral, you get to a point where you realize you're not hungry. You think you are, you imagine you are, but you're not. And then you get to the point where you realize you are, but you can satiate that hunger inside and not in all of those experiences and connection and all the beautiful, pretty things in life. And that's the one thing that really kind of distinguishes for the 4 and the 7 for me. Like I'm really struggling between the two, but the one thing that really distinguishes for me is like there's definitely a positivity and the world is a wonderful place with a lot of variety and things to experience. I don't identify that strongly with the sadness of the 4, but I do very strongly identify with this interjection thing. That thing that Manya spoke about of there's always an observer, there's always something watching what's going on.
And I hear you there, Nick, kind of hinting at that, like the equanimity and the joy of being with what is, the simple things. There's a flower, don't really need to grasp. I'm not attached to an idea. I'm with, what is. And in that, there's a satiety, being satiated.
Every experience, every person can fulfill that hunger for connection and experience, whether it's a horrible experience or a good experience or a horrible person or a nice person. That hunger can be fed
and
if it comes from an openness to whatever is.
Yeah, and even how you speak
acceptance or an embracing everything.
Yeah, embracing what is relaxes that whole thing. Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Yeah, the tri-type thing. Yeah, totally. We can all see it. This is why when people say tri-type is not a thing, they don't believe in it. I'm like, what? It's obvious, you know. So I just want to give you a sense of how some of the stuff can play out. Those of you who on my object relations course have seen this. But these defenses are going to take us to some of these extremes. And when we become centered in grounded presence and are able to be with the pain that arises in ourselves through fear of disconnection, fear of rejection, fear of not getting our needs met, if we're able to hold those feelings in our own bodies, we start coming to this place of presence in the center, where we aren't trying to establish regressive boundaries or clinging and grasping and begging. So these 4 quadrants kind of speak about when we aren't able to bring compassion to our own woundedness. So that blue circle of healthy self-esteem comes from deep self-compassion, self-acceptance, the authentic connection with, okay, this trauma, this defense mechanism, this is where I got this whole idea that I needed this defense mechanism. What child in me needed that? And how do I integrate that need and be honest with myself about that need? And it's through that noticing of our triggering that we start to relax. It's not through judgment, it's not through fighting, it's not through panel beating ourselves that we develop this stable home. Thich Nhat Hanh, the stable inner home, that's what we're looking for. Groundedness from within. There's only one way, and that's self-compassion. Really noticing the feelings arising, the terror, the fear, the feeling of rejection, and just just noticing with compassion in the moment. Wow, I'm triggered. So that's kind of what I want to leave you with. Don't judge yourself. So there we are. I'm going to save these slides somewhere and WeTransfer, Dropbox, whatever I need to do to make them accessible. In this case, I want to do that. I don't always share the slides. Sometimes I keep them for courses and whatever, but I want to give them. Brian, thank you. If you can put in the chat, if you've got a minute before you check out, what you're walking away with, just anything that you want to say. But any closing comments? I'll hang out for a bit. Renata, if you want to make me co-host, if you have to self-praise urgently.
I actually have to social for a change instead of self.
Nice.
Ing, just thank you, darling, as always, for your generosity and sharing and your depth of research that we all benefit from.
Yes, you see, people are clapping. Social self. I'm a good person. Can you see I'm such a good person?
And thanks to everybody for coming and sharing the space, and making it's just so beautiful to hear. I mean, I feel like I wanted to hear what Shanti had to say about 7. I wanted to hear from everybody, and 3 hours is a long time and it's a short time, and we don't get to hear from everyone. So just stay if you've got questions or comments. I know Ingrid will stay. She has endless capacity. But yeah, thanks for sharing the space, and thanks for sharing of yourselves. It really is such a joy just to be with you all, and lots of lovely learning. And for those that get up early, our friends in America who are up early to be with us. We had, somebody in Sydney who eventually conked out at like 1:30 in the morning. Amazing. So
but you know what's coming to mind as a potential thing is sometime later in the year, we have almost a repeat of this session where we say, okay, how did we apply this during the year in ourselves, in our clients? What did we notice? And how did this awareness of the defense mechanisms allow us to be touched by life in different ways? I think that might be really helpful, not just to dump knowledge and not follow up.
Yeah, maybe we have some sessions where there's no theory sharing. It's just talking about experiences. Yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah. What we've integrated from, of the last year of what we've seen and heard and experienced in our coaching, like our personal shifts, because sometimes they're so dramatic and we meet each other and we don't realize when we see each other again how much growth has happened. And that's like part of the joy of this community is hearing people's like realizations and growth. It's so inspiring. So I would love to do that maybe later in the year for one of the sessions that we haven't got a topic yet. How about that?
Yeah, let's do that. That'll be great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Lekker, thanks.
Love you madly.
Oh, big love. Did you make me co-host, Renata? Don't kill the meeting while we're still
No, wait. Let me make you host.
I hope you have fun tonight.
Thank you. Hold on. Let's stop recording first of all.